Prior to the pandemic, I think a lot of policymakers thought that some of the things we'd done over the past decades had us prepared for a pandemic. In fact, in 2019, the United States was ranked in a global measure as the nation most prepared to respond to a pandemic. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic showed us that we weren't quite as prepared as we thought we should be. All of us can Monday morning quarterback what's happened in the Trump administration, the Biden administration, and I think there's going to be some room probably in the next Congress for some oversight and discussion about what happened and what direction we should take. But the reality is, I think everybody did the best that they could under the circumstances that we were under. So what did we learn? I think I'm going to give just a few big takeaways. I told Jim I had about a 20-minute speech, but it's actually about 5 minutes, so I'm going to cut it down here. So I think one of the things that I'm finding that we learned that is that at the end of this, we're going to have to help our public health institutions regain the trust of the American people. Particularly from my perspective, the CDC, the FDA, particularly CDC, and because of really our overall lack of preparedness, the actions taken by the CDC seem to be inconsistent and changing all the time. And I can just tell you the people that I represent have lost confidence in that institution, which is really a big shame because as a doctor, it's been historically looked to worldwide for health-related issues. So that's one of the things. We have to maintain that, and that's one of the things. What resulted from that? Well, in my district, the vaccination rate's really low. I mean, the inconsistency from politicians, honestly, politicians are partially at fault for this, but the inconsistency of the CDC and their guidelines, really, the people I represent, the vaccination rate in Indiana is still very low, and it's primarily because of lack of confidence in the government. The second important thing is I think, is we need to make permanent things that worked. So how did Operation Warp Speed get us a vaccine in less than a year? We need to look at that. How did they do it? They worked with the government, with the private sector, right? We work together, and not just a government-only approach, but we work with the private sector, Pfizer and others, a bunch of other companies, and worked in a way that really got us to where we should go. We needed to go. We need to look at that, and we need to see how we can do that in other areas of the government. I'm a big private sector guy, free market. We need to look at that. We learned that, and I think we need to make some of those things permanent. We're not going to duplicate those results every time, but let's have some oversight and look at what worked and how we did it. And lastly, I'll just say, I do think we're going to have to look at some investments in our public infrastructure as it relates to our public health systems across the country. I can tell. I'll just speak for Indiana. Everybody thought our public health systems at the county level on up were pretty prepared to tackle this. We weren't. So it's not only the federal level, but the local and state level, all the way up to the feds. And we're, all of us, probably mostly at the local and state level, are going to have to make investments in our public health infrastructure to make sure the next time we're ready to tackle this type of a problem. So basically, those are some big picture things, and I'll pass it over to Richard after with that.
That was great. If you came here for Crossfire, you're not going to get it today. I agree with about everything he said. Jim, thanks for having me. It's great to be with all of you. I apologize to my table mates. I was over there talking, drinking coffee, and didn't come say hello, but glad to see all of you. Thank you all for this opportunity to come talk with you. I had one of my best friends in Congress, Susan Brooks, also my favorite member from Indiana. She's my favorite member from Indiana. I was devastated when she left Congress, but she asked me to take over the pandemic sort of lead for our side of the House, and so I appreciate that. I thought I'd be doing a lot of work on that this Congress since popular reauthorizations next year, but we really hadn't done a whole lot yet, which is very frustrating. But I was also tapped by Leader McCarthy to lead the Healthy Futures Task Force Security Subcommittee, which has really given me a platform to do a lot of the work our committee should have been doing, frankly, this year. We did a request for information for hundreds of companies. Some of them I see members in the room here today, and got a lot of really good feedback about the last pandemic. What went well, didn't go so well, what suggestions do you have for improving national stockpile, improving the processes. Frankly, our committee should have started 2 Januaries ago doing this. This is low-hanging fruit, and it's something that we could have done in a very bipartisan way. You know, they could have attacked Trump, whatever. But I think it's something where we're a little late to the game as a committee. But the Healthy Futures Task Force has spent a lot of time on this, so that's been as we're building our next contract with America. I think we're calling it a commitment to America again, but we're going to have a pretty detailed layout of where we stand on all topics. But I think the 3 of us are working on the healthcare side. We'll have a website. We'll probably roll out in September that the American people can search. But we're basically going to go to the American people and say, if you trust us with the majority, here's what we'll do on healthcare, and we're going to lay out pretty specific. Probably not down to the legislative text level, but give people a good idea of where we're going. My subcommittee had the goal to be mission ready for the next healthcare threat. And our 3 focuses were supply chains and China accountability, pandemic preparedness, and public health security. The security sub recommendations so far, we heard overwhelmingly from industry that the tax reform was the key to energizing U.S. manufacturing when it comes to healthcare. Number 2 was safeguards to ensure tax dollars don't go to adversaries. So make sure we're investing in U.S. companies. Protecting our borders from fentanyl is a big priority for us. I think another missed opportunity this Congress is we did a lot of work on opioids a few years ago. We haven't done a whole lot of oversight over that, and opioid usage has shot through the roof through the pandemic. It's something we're not really focusing on. We should be. Then you add the element of fentanyl, where now it's no longer an addiction could lead you to certain things. It's, hey, one Xanax borrowed from your buddy at a party on the weekend and you're dead. And we're seeing deaths in every neighborhood in America, and it's only getting worse. We've captured at the southern border enough fentanyl to kill every American 7 times. That's what we caught. But when I went down to the border Patrol said they send a family across here, and then a mile down the river they send whatever they want because they know we'll converge on that family. So how much got by that we don't know about it? That's what scares me to death. And then you read reports that they're coming up with ways to cook the fentanyl in your kitchen, and that's real scary because now it's not only 50-50 you might die if you take it. Now it's 50-50 you might die when you're cooking it, and then if you're successful, that's just more on the street. So fentanyl's a huge problem, and shame on us for not doing more as a Congress to look at that. The last thing is cutting red tape and requiring accountability and transparency in NIH and CDC. And I think that gets back to Larry's point. The American public, at least the red part of America, has lost confidence in these institutions. I think the CDC earned it. I think some of the criticism is unfair, but the culture of these institutions has got to be fixed. And I've got some ideas on how to do that, but we need to do it to save these institutions. I'm not one of those let's burn it down kind of people. I think those institutions are very important. I think their core missions are vital, but they've gotten too far away from their core missions, and that needs to be fixed. On the PAPA, PAPA reform is PAPA reauthorization is on us next year, and I think we're way behind the 8 ball on that. But a lot of the work we did with the subcommittee was kind of an eye towards that. It was originally created by a congressman named Richard Burr from North Carolina. Mm-hmm. You might have heard of him. I call him the Papa of Papa. We can get into more detail on that if you want. I introduced one piece of legislation, just make sure you're all aware of, H.R. 3635, the Strengthen America's National Stockpile Act. It passed the House in October, and provisions of it have been included in the Prevents Act over in the Senate. So, probably I'll just say a few words about Prevent and stop so we can hear from Buddy. As far as, we've obviously been watching very closely what they're they're doing in Senate prevents. I support Senator Byrd getting as many provisions into prevents as he can get, and getting it across the finish line. He's, of course, if you ask him, he says he's going to get PAPA done before the end of the year, but we'll see. But and a couple of my pieces of legislation have been included in it. Another bill, I've got the unannounced foreign drug facility inspection pilot program, which was included in the House passed user fee package, is also going to be included. So there are some positive things in there. I think there's, we'll just keep watching and we'll keep rooting for them, and more provisions I think Senator Byrd can get in, the better. But I think we're still going to have our work cut out for us to get PAPA completed next Congress. 9 months we'll have. So with that, I'll stop talking at you. We can talk ARPA H and other things if y'all want to ask questions. I'd be happy to opine on that as well. Appreciate the opportunity, and buddy, take
Well, thank y'all very much for having us here today. It's an honor to be with my two colleagues on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and my colleague in the Doctor's Caucus, Dr. Bucshon. Appreciate being with both of them. And it was mentioned in the introduction that for the first 6 years, the first 3 terms I was up here, I was the only pharmacist in Congress, and we had not had a pharmacist in Congress for many decades, to be quite honest with you. But one of my colleagues on the Energy and Commerce Committee, I won't name any names, but his initials are Billy Long, but he gave me the hashtag OPIC to mean only pharmacists in Congress. And then, of course, we got another pharmacist in Congress. Diana Harshbarger from Tennessee is now with us. And so anyway, Billy told me, he said, well, you can continue to use the hashtag OPIC, but now it means oldest pharmacist. So that really stinks. But nevertheless, I'm honored to be in Congress with Diana. She's doing a great job. The last couple of years have really been tough, and it's been tough on everybody. And I think that's something that we need to make sure that we don't just gloss over when we just say it's been tough. We've seen a lot of bad situations, a lot of bad incidents in our country. I am one that thinks that a lot of that has to do with the mental health of our country. And that is something that we have got to address. When we look at what has happened in Uvalde, when we look at what has happened in across our country, mental health has got to be a part of that. We've all been cooped up, and some of us handle it better than others. But for a lot of people, it has really been tough. And that's one aspect of this whole pandemic that I hope we don't miss out on, and I hope that we do address, and that is the mental health issue. Because it's going to be extremely important. And it's not just, okay, we're open now, so everybody's fine. And that would be nice if it would be just like that, but it's not like that. There are some people out there who are really struggling. And we need to be aware of that. We need to address that. I hope our committee, and I know our committee, will indeed use that as a priority and view that as a priority and address that. And that'll be very important. I'm one who, I've always said that there's a difference in knowing something and realizing something. Not many of you, but some of you are as old as I am here, and you can remember the late 70s when we knew that we were too dependent on the Middle East for our energy needs. But we realized it when all of a sudden they stopped pumping oil. And all of a sudden gas went up so high. And we realized that we needed to do something and achieve energy independence. Well, the same thing has happened during this pandemic. We knew that we were too dependent on other countries, i.e. China and India and other countries, for our pharmaceutical needs. But we realized that when all of a sudden we couldn't get some of those pharmaceuticals, when all of a sudden 90% of all the antibiotics in this world are made in China, and when all of a sudden the PPE, the personal protection equipment, we were having trouble getting it. Dr. Bucshon and I were told by the former ASPR in the Doctor's Caucus that they saw a downtick in the amount of PPE that was being sent here to America as early as the fall of 19. Now remember, we didn't really know this was happening until January, February of 20. But we were told that they saw a downtick in the amount of PPE. And that tells you right there that China was withholding PPE and holding it for themselves. Well, that's a lesson to us to be learned, that we've got to make sure that we're producing that over here. The same thing with pharmaceuticals. And I've got a piece of legislation. It's called Made in America. manufacturing active pharmaceutical ingredients, drugs, and excipients here in America. And what that legislation does is it try to repatriate some of those companies, pharmaceutical manufacturers who have gone overseas primarily because of labor costs, that they've gone overseas. We need to get them back in America. We need to start manufacturing pharmaceuticals and PPE here in America so that we're not dependent on other countries, particularly those countries who are our adversaries. We need to make sure that that happens. If we don't do that, shame on us. Shame on us if we don't address that. Another piece of legislation I want to tell you about that I've got has to do with stockpiles. Now, we've got national stockpiles, and we should continue with those national stockpiles, but I've got legislation that would create state stockpiles. It would actually be a program, a pilot program, that would give grants to states if they will create their own stockpile to complement the federal stockpiles, not to replace the federal stockpiles, but just to complement. That will help us. That will help us to be better prepared in the future with that. All of these things are extremely important. Again, if we don't learn our lessons from this, then shame on us. We should never let some of these things happen. And to Dr. Bucshon's point about making some of the things that have worked permanent, there's no better example than telehealth. Telehealth, and we had an advancement in telehealth. It advanced more in 4 weeks than it did in the previous 10 years. And now it is an integral part of our healthcare system, particularly in the rural areas. And I represent a large rural part of South Georgia. We always say there's two Georgias, there's Atlanta and everywhere else, and I'm everywhere else. But that's very important to us, and telehealth is very important. Now, I just heard someone's telling me we're getting 5G down in Valdosta in South Georgia. That's great. We need that. That just shows you how important, again, that's the jurisdiction of our committee, telecommunications, making sure that we've got broadband and internet in these rural areas, making sure that we can accommodate telehealth. So all of those things are extremely important, and we need to address them. We're going to do it in our committee. We're also going to do it when we take back the majority. Richard mentioned about the task force, and those are very important. We've got 7 task force out there that we're working on in preparation for when we take the majority. We're not just going to wait and say, okay, we're in the majority, what do we do now? We're getting prepared now with our commitment to America. And we're doing everything, healthy futures, energy, security, China competition. I'm on the big tech task force. That's a heavy lift, I will tell you. We got to do something about it. Big tech is very important. So all of that is extremely important, but we're getting prepared. We're going to be prepared, and certainly energy and commerce. I've always said it's the best committee in Congress, and I still believe that. But it's going to be even more important this upcoming session. So thank y'all very much.
You guys have given us so much to think about, but just to kind of send us all up, what was, based on the previous pandemic, or the pandemic that we just basically got through, what were the best things that we learned from it, and how do we move that to preparing for the next one?
Telehealth. I mean, as I said,
Those of you not from the South, that's telehealth.
Richard should translate.
Come on, y'all. No, seriously, telehealth is, it's become an integral part of our healthcare system, and now vaccines, the way after Operation Warp Speed, we know now, although we shouldn't rest on those laurels and we should still be prepared, but we know now we can do something quickly if we set our mind to it through public-private partnerships. I want to think that was something that was extremely important as well.
Yeah, you stole my two. Telehealth, public-private partnerships, absolutely. I think lesson learned. We need a better command and control for pandemics. Senator Burr initially wrote PAPA and had the vice president as the head of the structure when there's a crisis. Dick Cheney said, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. And so Burr changed it. But we need to look at a way that you've got White House level leadership overseeing and saying, here's your job, you go do this, you go do that, assigning the different components in government, making sure it's coordinated, changing when we need to stop and go the other direction. We need much better command and control.
I'm going to make a positive out of a negative. I think the pandemic showed us that some of our core institutions like CDC and FDA are not quite necessarily what we thought. As far from a leadership perspective, I think the idea of having the CDC director be Senate confirmed is a great idea. We need to do what we can. I think it's a positive that we learn the negatives, that we need to do what we can to look at these core institutions, make sure they're doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, and try to keep the politicians as much as possible out of core institutions like the CDC, which is supposed to be about science and facts and that's what I agree with the other things they talked about also, but I really think we have got to regain the confidence of the American people as it relates to these core institutions, and we're going to have to take a deep dive on why. And a coordinated effort, command and control, like Richard mentioned, is critical to resolving that problem, I think.